There's no doubt that Cranky Kong, Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong Jr. have the most complicated relationship in the history of Mario, with decades worth of conflicting information or lack thereof from various sources and fan interpretation. This topic is nothing short of a hot mess. But sifting through the hot garbage that is Mario lore may as well be a hobby of mine. With Donkey Kong Bonanza and its nonsense adding fuel to the Burning Man and driving traffic to my old video, I figured now would be a good time, and by good time that would have been months ago, to go through all the evidence, theories, and contradictions in hope of finding a reasonable answer to this convoluted Kong family tree. Because of just how many different sources there are talking about the Kong's relationships with each other, I'll only be focusing on the ones most relevant to their respective sections, and go over most of the invalid sources towards the end and explain why they are so as to not bloat the video. If you're not new to the channel or didn't pick up on what I said earlier, you may have realized I already made a video on this a year ago. If you're someone that watched that video, I just want to say, I'm sorry you had to see that. That video was some grade A dog shit and had my baby syndrome written all over it. I honestly want to remake that video less than a month after I uploaded it. It was that bad, but I didn't want to do it too soon. I'm not going to delete it, but if you plan on watching it out of curiosity, just be prepared for some major tonal whiplash if you're used to how I argue today, because that is one piece of shit, baby. Alright, enough ripping on myself, let's get into this. Let's keep the introductions brief and get a general overview on the common consensus of their relationship before diving into each Kong individually. Cranky Kong is the father of DK Jr. and the grandfather of the current Donkey Kong, though there was a brief period of time where he was called his son in various sources that echo this. Modern Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. are the grandson and son of Cranky Kong respectively, though there's no official statement on the relationship between these two, and there's contention on whether or not these two are the same person due to a variety of sources. By admission of himself as far back as the manual of Donkey Kong Country, Cranky Kong is the original Donkey Kong from the arcade trilogy in '94, which chronologically take place before DKC in that order. This would be the main narrative until 1999 with the release of Donkey Kong 64. Towards the beginning of the game and in its manual, Cranky calls DK his son. That same year, Rare gave a response when questioned about the confusion by stating, "As far as I know, our DK is the son of Cranky," which does indeed make him the original Donkey Kong Jr. all grown up. So if you see Cranky referred to as DK's granddad anywhere, just cover your eyes and hum loudly until it goes away. I don't think it takes a genius to realize that the validity of this statement needs to be called into question. This statement is from Rare's website's letter page called Scribes, where they answered fan questions in a rather humorous and sarcastic manner. More importantly, keep in mind that the Country series was the first to introduce Cranky as he is now, stating numerous times that he is the original Donkey Kong and him bringing up his history with Mario. The only thing that gives this statement validity is the fact that they said our DK. For those of you who don't know, Rare created their Donkey Kong games, those being the Country trilogy and their GBA ports, the Land trilogy, 64, and the Diddy Kong racing games, independent of Nintendo's involvement, meaning that this statement will only be valid in Rare's continuity. The idea of Cranky being DK's father is further disproven due to the Japanese version of DK64 and its manual, removing any part where DK is called his son, and really all mention of family relation, the only exception being Wrinkly, who's called Cranky's wife. While Rare is the company that made the game and its story, you could argue that Nintendo is the ultimate authority in this situation. Not that I like making appeals to authority, but the contrast between the two narratives can't be ignored, given that Japanese DKC go with the grandpa interpretation. Whichever route you choose to take for Donkey Kong 64 doesn't matter in the long run, as from here, Cranky would always be referred to as DK's grandpa in both regions. When it comes to modern Donkey Kong, the confusion for him goes both ways, as he's at times been called both the original Donkey Kong and a grown-up DK Jr. Donkey Kong Country's manual describes him as a relative of the classic arcade character, even go as far as to call him a completely new character. Given Cranky is confirmed to be the original DK and his grandfather in the same manual, stack that on top of Donkey Kong's description and you have your family tree established. Next would be the sun confusion from 64, but I covered that in Cranky's section, so we'll move on. On the back of the box for the original Mario vs. Donkey Kong, DK is described as Mario's original foe. I don't even know how this mistake was made, seeing how this game came out nearly 10 years after the original DKC, though this mistake wouldn't matter seeing as the Japanese version doesn't have this description. March of the Mini seeks to put an end to all of this confusion with its manual. Donkey Kong's description states that he instantly fell in love with Pauline as soon as he saw her at the theme park's opening ceremony. This is even backed up by the Japanese version, as both its manual and website practically say the same thing by saying, he falls in love at first sight with Pauline. This would make it impossible for Donkey Kong and DK Jr. to be the same person, given Jr. met Pauline in Donkey Kong 94. That would be if it weren't for Bonanza. Oh my god, Bonanza. Look, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat this. Donkey Kong Bonanza can't be canon to anything. I'm gonna dedicate a whole video to this, but let me give you the TLDP. Spoiler alert, Pauline in this game is actually teenage Pauline. No time travel or de-aging as theorized, this is straight up Pauline. This contradicts everything having to do with Cranky as DK, modern DK, and Mario. Keep in mind, Cranky references his history with Mario multiple times. Combine that with all the modern DK statements we went over, and there's no way you can argue that this game is consistent with the current narrative of the verse, and that's not even all of it. The final thing to cover is the Super Mario Bros. Movie, in which DK is Cranky's son. This doesn't matter to the games as the movie is its own continuity and doesn't reflect the current lore of the games. There's not a lot to say about Donkey Kong Jr. on his own, as most of his confusion is more so tied to modern DK. From the beginning, Jr. is considered Cranky's son, and that doesn't change throughout the few games he's relevant in. The most bizarre thing about Jr. is that the exact relationship between him and modern DK is never stated in any official source. You could say that because Jr. is Cranky's son and DK is Cranky's grandson, you can put 2 and 2 together, but I still find it weird nonetheless. There is one source that addresses all 3 Kongs, that being the 2017 book Playing with Superpower Nintendo Super NES Classics by Prima Guides, but it has 2 contradicting claims. Page 112 states that Donkey Kong is DK Jr.'s son, while page 192 says he's DK Jr. all grown up. Prima actually addressed this contradiction when asked about it and said that page 112 is talking about their in-game relationship, and the all grown up line was a metaphor comparing his original 8-bit design to his modern design. Despite this, I don't view anything from Prima Guides as a valid source of information. Everything Prima produces only applies to the English version of games, contains a mountain of contradictions, be it the plot or details about the game, including what I just showed you, and is the interpretation of whoever at Prima wrote that book without Nintendo fact checking. And these problems aren't just limited to their coverage of Nintendo. If you don't believe me, stick with me in the long run, cause this won't be the last time you hear of Prima's tomfuckery. With all that said, let's recap. Despite contradictions throughout history and varying sources, each Kong can be argued to hold the title they are most associated with, Cranky as the grandfather, Donkey Kong Jr. as the son, and modern DK as the grandson. Seems simple enough, right? Have you seen how much time is left in this video? The main thing left questioning is how this entire family tree fits into the current timeline we have. But before we enter that, we first need to address a version of one of these Kongs I've yet to acknowledge, Baby DK.
Hold it right there.
Let me stop myself before I briefly recap the plot to Yoshi's Island DS for what, like the 3rd time now? Hopefully you know the plot. The main thing we're addressing is the fact that Baby Donkey Kong and Baby Mario are in the same game, and due to Kamek stating that the Star Children came into being around the same time, that would make Mario and Donkey Kong around the same age. That's pretty straightforward, but raises a lot of questions given everything I've shown you so far. Though, just as with any problem in Mario lore that could kickstart a second brain cell, the community has created 2 separate theories to explain this. The first is that the Donkey Kong and Mario from the original arcade games are actually the grandfathers of modern DK and Mario. I'm not even going to waste your time on speculation, this theory is directly disproven by Odyssey. In the post game, Pauline will give you a quiz about herself, in which she asks 2 questions that stand out. The most notable one is, what is something she experienced in the past, with the answer being getting captured by an ape, followed by her calling it traumatic, but it helped make her the person she is today. I just want to point out that the original Japanese isn't that specific. She calls it a tough experience that's now a good memory. The second question is, what is her treasure? Though for this one, the answer choices themselves tell a story, those being a purse, a hat, or an umbrella. All three of those objects call back to the original arcade Donkey Kong. After this, if you bring her a purse to offer as a birthday present, she'll say that she lost it a long time ago, and only in English does she specify when she lost it, on that terrible day. Regardless of that difference, all of this combined confirms that Pauline is Lady from the arcade Donkey Kong, and that she's the one that experienced those events, making Mario Jumpman, as if that weren't obvious, and Donkey Kong Cranky Kong. The second theory is more so a combination of multiple theories, but the main one is that Cranky Kong is baby DK, and both Junior and modern DK still exist due to combining when gorillas start reproducing and the Kong species' rapid growth and aging. While I originally laughed off the absurdity of this theory in my original video, I do understand the reasoning behind it. Before I dive into this, let me point out something really important. Ignoring the arguments of the theory to come, there is not a single shred of evidence that would ever imply that Cranky Kong is baby DK in universe. Absolutely none. Like, I don't even know what you want me to say. Any argument in favor of it is just baseless headcanon. The next theory in this hodgepodge attempts to explain the drastic changes in Kong growth and appearance by arguing that Kongs age and reproduce faster than humans, using a variety of statements, changes in character designs, and headcanon based on real facts. Let's take this one step at a time and go over the statements first. The main statement in question is what of Cranky's possible rants in Donkey Kong Country when you approach him. Last time I saw you, you were wearing diapers. This seems pretty straightforward, unless you think about it for more than 5 seconds. Technically, the last time he saw him was right before the game started when he woke DK up, so that was a fucking lie. But in all seriousness, I need to go over the Kongs involved with this before I can fully debunk this claim. The main Kong's evidence for this theory are Cranky, DK, and Tiny. Cranky's drastic shift from his prime in 94 to the shriveled up raisin he is now, DK's jump from DK Jr. to his rare design. That difference isn't important, I just hate his modern design.
No sir, I don't like it.
And most notably, Tiny's growth spurt. As I said earlier, these examples are used to argue that Kongs age faster than humans. While I do understand the logic behind this, I have to say I mostly disagree. Ironically, Tiny puts a massive hole in this theory. Remember, according to Rare's continuity, Tiny is Dixie's younger sister, yet between the two, Tiny is the one who hit a growth spurt first, while Dixie to this day is still the same as her debut. This goes to show that Kong's drastic changes in appearance are not directly tied to their age. The final part of this theory is dependent on the idea that Kongs age and reproduce the same way gorillas do. Assuming Cranky and DK Jr. reproduced at the earliest possibility, combined with the growth spurt, it would explain how all three Kongs are able to exist in line with Mario's current age of 24 to 25 years old. After looking into the facts of this matter, I can definitively say that this theory is fucking stupid, and everyone who's ever argued it don't know how to do research. If you look up when can gorillas start reproduction, Google's AI summary will tell you that females can start at the age of 10, while males have to wait until they reach silverback status at 15. But in order for people to argue this theory, they say that males start reproducing as soon as 11. With this contradiction in mind, I actually looked deeper into this, and this is where people's lack of research begins to show. As I said earlier, male gorillas typically begin reproducing around the age of 15 when they become silverback, which is a sign of maturity. Despite this, there is some truth to the younger age claim, but only because of one specific circumstance, that being, male gorillas can begin reproducing between 11 to 13 years old, only if they've been in captivity their whole life, because they're ready to mate sooner than those in the wild. It took me less than 5 minutes to fact check this. Now, let's entertain this idea and see where it goes. Assuming that Cranky is baby DK, let's play devil's advocate and argue that he was in captivity his whole life, which is unprovable, and had Junior as soon as possible. That would make him 11 to 12 years old depending on how you think they reproduce. Junior, on the other hand, did not grow up in captivity, so he couldn't have reproduced before the age of 15. Which would mean when Junior had DK, going by Mario's age at the earliest, DK is a newborn by the time Mario is 26, with the latest being a newborn by the time Mario is 28. This theory only works based on misinformation, the assumption that Cranky is baby DK, and the assumption that both Cranky and Junior grew up in captivity. All that said, and I've glossed over the biggest flaw with this theory up until now. What, you thought I was done? What proof do we even have that Kongs age and reproduce the same way as gorillas? That may seem redundant, but we've never answered this exact question. People assume that to be the case because most Kongs designs are based on gorillas, but what about the rest of the species? Diddy resembles a monkey, Dixie resembles a chimpanzee, Blanky an orangutan. Design-wise, a handful of them don't resemble gorillas and/or are humanoid. When it comes to their reproduction, we don't know if Kongs mate or if they're delivered by storks like humans. Some may argue this to be the case because of Yoshi's Island DS, but we can't say for absolute fact because baby DK being returned by a stork doesn't prove that exactly. Multiple babies, almost entirely humans, were the ones that were kidnapped, which storks are responsible for. As for the mating option, there's not a single thing that would prove that to be the case. Of the few traits that Kong share with the real gorillas they're based on, why the fuck would we assume that the way they reproduce is one of them? There's no evidence to prove this, that's all I can say. So we don't know how Kongs reproduce. As for their aging, I believe there's enough evidence to argue how it works given the examples we have. Using what we've seen with Cranky and Tiny, I think Kongs undergo massive changes in physical appearance once they reach certain milestones in their life. Though as seen with Tiny, these changes are not directly tied to age and seem to be unpredictable, like the window for when a teenager first hits puberty or when women start menopause. I would have made a comparison to Saiyan's aging in Dragon Ball, but that statement is not consistent. If anything, it's more like Pokemon evolutions, given how drastically any of their physical properties can change. This would explain Tiny's sudden growth and why Cranky went from the big Kong he was in the arcade trilogy in '94 to the shrunken down shell of his former self in universe, as opposed to them being redesigned with no explanation. With the main bulk of important sources and theories out the way, where does that leave us? Consistently, Cranky Kong is the grandfather, Donkey Kong Jr. is the son, and modern Donkey Kong is the grandson who is also baby DK, who is relative in age to Mario. Great, we're right back where we started. Except we have clarification, as if that helped. With everything in mind, I've come to a conclusion. More specifically, I've revised my conclusion. Cranky, Jr., and DK cannot all exist at the same time. Given the current narrative Nintendo's running with, that's just not possible, and I think they came to their own conclusion decades ago. Cranky Kong is DK's grandfather and ancestor, Donkey Kong is the grandson and successor, a completely new character, and Donkey Kong Jr. no longer exists. I'm not just saying this because of everything we went over. As I said earlier, Nintendo already came to their conclusion, and I have proof that they indirectly confirmed this. Remember Pauline's quiz in Odyssey? Pauline confirmed that she got kidnapped, but there's something odd about what she says. Let's go over it again. The question she asked is, what is something I experienced in the past? The answer is getting captured by a gorilla, with her response being, that's right, correct. It was a tough experience, but now it's a good memory. Now you may be asking what this has to do with DK Jr. Did you notice how she said a gorilla, not plural? How it was a tough experience, but now it's a good memory? Pauline is talking as if she only got kidnapped once. Let me remind you that in this instance, she's only talking about when Cranky kidnapped her, not modern DK. A counter to this would be Cranky's statement that he was whisking off maidens and throwing barrels around the place 7 days a week. Cranky has a well-documented history of exaggerated claims, you know, it's kind of his thing, so that calls this into question, and as I said earlier, Pauline's question and answer would have reflected that if it were true. What I'm saying is, in the context of Pauline's questions and answers, Donkey Kong 94 never happened. Nintendo took it out back and retconned it without a sound. When it comes to Junior specifically, there is a logical reason as to why they got rid of him. Funny enough, it was one of the few things I got right in my original video, but part of my reasoning was wrong. The reason why Donkey Kong Jr. was written out was due to the fact that his character was no longer needed. I'll give you the too long didn't watch version to save time. The team that made the 1981 Donkey Kong game had unused ideas and began working them into a sequel. Miyamoto wanted DK to be the star, but he was too big, so Donkey Kong Jr. was created to fill that role. His main role was to be a small playable Donkey Kong, but someone else came in and took that from him. That's right, Diddy did it. Diddy Kong is the main reason why DK Jr. was taken out of the games. After Diddy's introduction, Jr. was only playable in 2 major games, not counting Game & Watch, before being relegated to cameos. If you want direct proof of this, it was found that Jr. was originally supposed to be in Mario Kart Double Dash as Donkey Kong's partner before being replaced with Diddy Kong. He outclassed Jr. in just about every way, and Nintendo saw that. To put it simply, Donkey Kong Jr. served his purpose and was replaced with someone with more potential than him. Now you may be asking, if DK Jr. no longer exists, how are Cranky and DK grandfather and grandson? Well, dear viewer, let me be honest with you. There is no true answer to that. That, and it may not matter. Cranky and DK aren't the only characters with a weird grandparent-grandchild relationship in the Mario series. Easily the biggest example of this is Dr. Crygor and Penny. Crygor and Penny are grandfather and granddaughter, but something strange about them is that the generation in between them has never been established. Crygor's been in the WarioWare series since the beginning, and Penny first showed up in WarioWare DIY. She's since been in 6 games, and there's been no mention of the generation between them. Another example is Donkey Kong Bonanza with Pauline and her grandma. They're all the same, a grandparent and a grandchild with no one in between. In conclusion, all evidence points to Cranky being the grandfather and modern Donkey Kong being his grandson. Donkey Kong Jr., who was at one point the son of Cranky, is no longer a part of the equation according to Nintendo's current narrative. All theories trying to include Donkey Kong Jr., whether it be arguing he's DK before he grew up or his father, are met with timeline contradictions, scientific contradictions, and statements that drive home that he can't be modern DK and possibly may have never existed in the current continuity. As for Cranky and DK being grandfather and grandson with no generation in between, there's simply no explanation for this, but it's also the same way for others in the verse. That's just the relationship they have. With the main topics out of the way, I want to go over the sources I left out due to not being well known, let alone important at all. The first I skipped is a line from DKC Exposed, The Making of Donkey Kong Country. This was a promotional VHS that was given to Nintendo Power subscribers before the game's release. The Super Mario Wiki claims that they called Cranky either his dad or grandfather.
There's a lot of characters. I like the whole Kong family. We got Cranky. Cranky's the star of the original Donkey Kong game.
Still alive, is he?
Dad or grandfather played that game.
But this is wrong. The entire line is, we got Cranky. Cranky is the star of the original Donkey Kong game. Your dad or grandfather played that game.
We got Cranky. Cranky's the star of the original Donkey Kong game.
Still alive, is he?
Dad or grandfather played that game.
After actually listening to that for the first time, I can't even begin to understand how they came to that conclusion. Next is any statement from anyone who's worked on the games. Specifically in this context, that would be Leigh Loveday, the rare employee who wrote the scribe statement I talked about earlier, and Greg Mayles, who worked on the DKC trilogy in '64. In 2017, he responded to someone on Twitter asking about Cranky's relationship to DK and said, "I'm pretty sure when I made this stuff up nearly 25 years ago that he was his grandson. By DK64, he was so senile he couldn't remember." Neither of these are valid due to 1. Death of the author, the story of the game speak for themselves, and 2. Their interpretations would, again, only apply to the English Rare continuity, not to Japanese or most games that release after '64. Next is going to be any character bio and description from the Great Mario Character Encyclopedia and the 1993 Character Manual. The Encyclopedia, for short, is a Japanese exclusive book released in 1994 made in collaboration with Nintendo. The 1993 Character Manual is a character reference guide for multiple Nintendo franchises, not just Mario, to be used for work done with their IPs. Nintendo being more open with their IPs, you couldn't even imagine it today. I'm not even going to go too deep into this one. Both of these sources are full of outdated information and stuff that's just wrong for both then and now. Next is any description from any Smash Bros. Game. All of the English profiles and descriptions about the Kong's relationships or who they are localizations and are not present in the Japanese versions. Finally, let's end this with a big one and go over every source that has its own takes on the Kongs and why they're all not valid for the same reason. This includes, but is not limited to, any manga, magazine, guide, book, website, or TV show that was not made by Nintendo of Japan, as it would be their own interpretations and localizations. And yes, this includes Nintendo of America. This doesn't always apply when it comes to games that were made in English first, but as I said earlier, the English version can have mistakes or separate interpretations that are not representative of the later refined Japanese version. Well, that was a lot. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe if you haven't already to keep up with the channel's content. Until next time, see ya.